Blog Talk Radio.
I don't know if it's a short time and then we start forgetting it again or whatever, but this is that time.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first broadcast of Overt Attention Show. I will be your host, Brian Ingram. A little bit about me here. I've been doing these podcasts for since about 2011 was the first time I started doing them, and then in the midst of about 2011, I joined up with Matthew Miller on the End Time Tribune, which is also another show that is hosted here on Blog Talk Radio. Now, to get right into this, we have had something happen here in the middle of the night. As a matter of fact, it was shortly after I woke up that we had reports that there was a missile strike that happened on an airbase, the T-4 airbase near Homs, Syria. Now, at first, the Pentagon and the United States was being blamed, and then the Pentagon officials came forward and said we had nothing to do with this. Now, as things progressed throughout the night, there has been pretty high speculation here that Israel was involved in this airstrike on these bases. There's a lot of details that are pointing to the fact that they flew the exact path that has been taken before when Israeli IAF forces go in and bomb and hit these bases here. So the name of the base here is Tiras Military Air Base. Now, for instance, we have a story that came out of the Times of Israel. 14 said killed in attack on Syrian facility previously targeted by Israel. Iranians reportedly among fatalities in early morning missile strike on T-4 Air Base. U.S. denies involvement. IDF won't comment. And as we go further into this article here, missile strike on an airbase in central Syria early Monday, killing 14 people, including Iranians, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights Monitor. Syria's state-run news agency confirmed the strike but did not comment on the number of casualties, saying only there are martyrs and wounded. Although initially the agency said it was likely an American aggression, following a denial by the United States, the Russian military and Syrian dictator Bashar Assad's regime accused Israel of carrying out the attack. Israel refused to comment on the claims. The target of the reported missile strike was the Tias Air Base, also known as the T-4 Air Base, outside Palmyra in central Syria. Syrian state media reported that its air defense intercepted a number of incoming missiles, but that others hit the base. According to a military source in Damascus, the Syrian air defense system was deployed from the Musiic air base after the jets entered Syria from Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Lebanese news site Al Masdar News reported. This is the route that Israeli jets generally take before bombing military targets in Syria, according to foreign reports. Syrian television showed footage of the alleged Israeli missiles flying through Syrian airspace towards the base. Israel conducted an airstrike against the TS base on February 10 after an Iranian operator working out of it flew an Iranian-made drone into Israeli territory, according to the army. Iran and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps Special Unit Quds Force for some time have been operating the T-4 air base in Syria next to Palmyra, with support from the Syrian military and with permission from the Syrian regime, the Israeli Defense Forces said in a statement at the time. And this article goes on to explain quite a few details as well in this. And, of course, a vast majority of this, once again, is coming from the Associated Press. Now, in tandem with this, there is an analysis that was released by Israeli National News, or Arutz Sheva, entitled Analysis, Russia is Aiding Iran Axis Prepare for War with Israel. Byline is Netanyahu has always said that the deployment of the Iranian-backed pro-Assad coalition near the Israeli border constituted a red line. With all eyes on Israel's southern front, where Hamas is desperately trying to conceal the fact it has run out of military options. It is in its never-ending war against the Jewish state. Hezbollah and the pro-Assad axis seem to be gearing up for a long-anticipated confrontation with the IDF. Iranian and Israeli media reported last week that the pro-Assad coalition is preparing for an offensive against Islamist rebel groups in the Quneitra and Dara provinces in southern Syria. The pro-Assad axis, which includes Hezbollah and other Shiite militias, has reportedly deployed tanks and heavy artillery on the Syrian Golan Heights. Some of the weaponry is placed within the demilitarized buffer zone along with Israeli border, a clear violation of the 1974 armistice agreement between Syria and Israel, which officially ended the Yom Kippur War. Israel is expected to file a complaint against the Syrian regime at UNDOF, the now defunct international peacekeeping force, which left Syria for Israel after Islamist rebel groups conquered the Syrian side of the Golan Heights in 2013 and 2014. Iranian and Arab media last week reported Russia is delivering new tanks, BMPs, and other heavy weaponry to Assad's forces ahead of the Golan offensive. Russia's dangerous double game. Russia is clearly playing a double game in Syria, as became clear from a Reuters investigation which was published last Friday. Now, a side note here, folks, this Reuters article which came out last Friday is a fairly in-depth investigation into mercenaries being moved through civilian airlines. I would advise going out and taking a look at this. If we can get further documentation on this article from other sources, it will help further clear this up and back this up. Not stating that this is a quote-unquote lie. I'm just saying when you have multiple sources that are backing information, it makes it much more viable. Now, moving on. A team of Reuters reporters found out that Russia is using civilian airplanes of the sanctioned Syrian airliner Wings to transfer Russian mercenaries from Rostov Airport in southern Russia to Syria. There, they are spearheading the battle against rebel groups in the devastated country and are often the first ones to enter captured towns and villages. The Russian military contractors refused to talk about their mission, but Reuters spoke with other sources who said there could be up to 3,000 Russian mercenaries fighting for Assad. The mercenaries are working for Wagner, a Russian company owned by oligarch Prigozhin, who maintains ties with the Russian Defense Ministry and is close to Russia's President Vladimir Putin. In December 2017, Putin announced that he would withdraw Russian troops from Syria. I order the Defense Minister and the Chief of the General Staff to start withdrawing the Russian group of troops to their permanent bases, the Russian leader said at the time. Another indication that Russia is trying to expand its influence in Levant and is playing a double role in the conflict between the Iranian axis and Israel came from a Hezbollah official who spoke to the Nation, reporter Saloom Anderson. Now, folks, on Saturday night's program, and I believe I might have even mentioned this in Friday night's program over on the End Time Tribune, I brought up this article, and I stated, everybody go out there and find this and read this. Now, this article goes on explaining little quotes here from that original article. Sophisticated Russian weaponry gets to Hezbollah. The Hezbollah official who spoke on a condition of anonymity revealed that Russia has delivered sophisticated weaponry to Hezbollah. Russia gave the maximum they could for Hezbollah. Hezbollah has T-90 light tanks in Qasar. In addition, Hezbollah owns S-200 surface-to-air missiles. The Hezbollah official said, referring to a town in the Qom Mountains near the Lebanese border where the Iranians are suspected of having built an underground nuclear facility. The Hezbollah man also confirmed that Iran, together with Shiite terrorist organizations, has built missile factories in Lebanon, but said the facilities only upgrade existing missile types. Israel is concerned that Iran is helping Hezbollah convert crude rockets into guided missiles, which can reach sensitive facilities and population centers in the country. Other Hezbollah representatives told Anderson that Hezbollah is now in the possession of anti-aircraft, anti-ship, and long-range missiles. It goes on. The U.S. and Russia vie over Lebanon. The Russians have also tried to drive a wedge between the United States and the government of Saad Hariri in Lebanon by closing a multi-billion-dollar deal, which would have included the delivery of modern Russian weaponry to the Lebanese armed forces, intelligence sharing, and training of LAF soldiers. The U.S. is the main supplier of military aid to the official Lebanese army, which is today controlled by Hezbollah, according to Israeli military experts and politicians. Prime Minister Saad Hariri reportedly scuttled the deal with Russia, claiming he's under pressure from the U.S. and donors who have just pledged more than $11 billion to save the ailing Lebanese economy. Hariri recently announced he intends to increase LAF presence along the Israeli border, citing Israel's hostile intentions and claiming the Jewish state remains the primary threat to Lebanon. The LAF has increased its presence in southern Lebanon after the IDF started to build a new security fence on the Israeli side of the so-called Blue Line, the UN-recognized international border between Israel and Lebanon. LAF soldiers have further confiscated armored vehicles of UNFIL, the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, which has proven to be useless in preventing Hezbollah from rebuilding itself south of the Litani River after the 2006 Second Lebanon War. Hezbollah has now built a new defense line against an IDF invasion of southern Lebanon by turning hills into long terraces with huge boulders, which are meant to serve as traps for Israel's Merkava tank in the next war. This article goes on. The Iranian Axis. The Lebanese news site Narhanet, meanwhile, reported that Hezbollah will wage any future war with Israel as part of an axis. Eisenkot and others know well that a choice of war is not a picnic. The next time we will fight as an axis. We will not fight alone, the unnamed Hezbollah official claimed, referring to recent statements by Gaby Eisenkot, the chief of staff of the IDF, who predicted war with the Iranian Axis recently. The Lebanese President Michael Aoun has branded Eisenkot's remarks with other rhetoric used by Israeli officials in response to Iranian and Hezbollah threats against the Jewish state, an act of war. The registered Israeli officials' threats are unacceptable, and we consider them to be an act of war against Lebanon, Aoun told UN envoy Pernille Daller-Kardal in Beirut on Friday. It was the first time Aoun talked about war with Israel. He did so on numerous occasions over the past few months. Aoun's war rhetoric coincided with a new Iranian threat to raze the Israeli cities Haifa and Tel Aviv to the ground. If you want Haifa and Tel Aviv to be razed to the ground, you can try the chance once again. Ayatollah Saeed Ahmed Khatami, a member of Iran's Assembly of Experts, told worshippers during Friday's prayers in Tehran. He too was responding to remarks made by Israeli officials and Eisenkot. Israel speaks to Trump. All the above explains why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided to discuss recent developments in the Middle East with U.S. President Donald Trump in a telephone call which took place last week. Trump last week raised eyebrows in CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command in the Middle East, by vowing he would pull back the U.S. Army from Syria, and alarmed the Israeli Prime Minister. According to Associated Press, the discussion between the two leaders grew tense when Netanyahu expressed his concerns about a possible premature U.S. withdrawal from Syria. The American president also drew the ire of his own military brass when he reportedly refused to listen to their advance not to undermine the new U.S. policy on Syria, which focuses on stopping Iran from taking over the country. CNN reported U.S. military's commanders left the White House meeting beside themselves about the president's plan to leave Syria soon. Trump has since then somewhat retracted his statements over a hastily withdrawal from Syria, and media reports suggesting the U.S. military in Syria is now setting up new frontline positions in the eastern and northern part of the country. Israel, meanwhile, is closely monitoring the situation in Syria and Lebanon by using drones and other sophisticated intelligence gathering equipment. Now, folks, this explains the backdrop of everything that has been developing here, that I have brought up pieces of these over time over at the End Time Tribune. Now, we had this article was released here on the 8th of April, and today now is the 9th. So this was released yesterday, and this sort of gives you a fairly clear-cut backdrop of what has been going on. And this explains basically the gist of everything that I've been watching very closely now, multiple months on end. For instance, we have the situation that was brought up here with the leader of Lebanon. Now, everybody think backwards to at the time when Saudi Arabia and, the Prince Mohammed bin Salman had gathered up all the rich people in Saudi Arabia, took them into prison on corruption charges, and then it's later been revealed that, essentially for them to get out, they had to pay large fees. And the richest of them that owns a huge amount of businesses throughout the world, and some major ones in the United States, stated just that. And you can find these stories out there from going backwards in time. Now, when we take into consideration as well the reports that began to surface on Saturday about a chemical attack allegedly launched by Bashar al-Assad's forces. When it began, they first stated out of the White House, Donald Trump, so on and so forth, pointed the finger right at Russia. And this thing has continued to build and build and build. Now, this was pulled up about 27 minutes ago as I was prepping here, and I just, if you go over to AP News, you can actually create an account, which is rather handy, and go in there and keep track of stories that you can follow. But nonetheless, just to look at some of these headlines here. The latest, Erdogan tells Putin of concerns on Syria attack. We're going to take a look at this one real quick here. Trump confers with military on suspected gas attack in Syria. And this is out of, once again, AP News. President Donald Trump plans to confer with senior military leaders Monday after he threatened a big price to pay for a suspected poison gas attack in Syria that killed women and children. Trump was set to get a briefing and have dinner with military leaders. Monday is the first day on the job for his new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who has previously advocated significant airstrikes against Syria. The White House deliberations came as Russia and the Syrian military blamed Israel for a pre-dawn missile attack on a major airbase in central Syria, saying Israeli jets launched the missiles from Lebanon's airspace. A war monitoring group said the airstrikes killed 15 people, including Iranians active in Syria. Syria's news agency, SANA, initially said the attack came on the T-4 airbase was likely an American aggression, but Pentagon spokesman Christopher Sherwood quickly denied the United States was behind the strike, and the agency then dropped the accusation, blaming Israel instead. Saturday's suspected poison gas attack took place in a rebel-held town near Damascus amid a rescue offensive by Syrian government forces after the collapse of a truce. Syrian activists, rescuers, and medics said the attack in Douma killed at least 40 people, with families found suffocated in their houses and shelters. The reports could not immediately be independently verified. Officials in Washington worked Sunday to verify the claim by Syrian opposition activists and rescuers that the Assad government was responsible. Just over a year ago. Now, I'm going to stop right here, folks. Remember what happened last year when there was reports of an alleged Syrian chemical attack. America strode along past Cyprus. Okay, this is in biblical terms, that is Kittim. Remember that. They came over and started shooting Tomahawk missiles at an airbase that later on the reports basically tell you that they didn't really hit anything of any value. Now, you might want to take note of the fact that he was also in a meeting with one of the Chinese, be it diplomats, I don't remember exactly who it was, at the very time he ordered the strikes. And there was many that were kind of scratching their heads and wondering, is this some kind of show of force while he's talking with the Chinese? That might not seem like anything at first, but if you consider what is happening right now between the United States and China with this trade war that is happening as we speak. Okay, we've had the Shanghai open up the petro yuan connected to the Chinese dollar. Okay, this all happened in the midst of announcements that are coming out of China stating they had broken off all negotiations with the United States around March 29. And yet America keeps telling everybody, and the stock markets keep shooting up on those days, that, well, we're in the midst of negotiations, when China is stating they broke them off. Around the same time, the petrodollar is now being connected to the Chinese money. Okay, this is given a loophole. Now, when you consider all the sanctions that just happened with Russia, main oligarchs connected to Vladimir Putin, look, folks, they can throw these different sanctions now on these groups that are allied with China. Stop and think about it for a while. Another thing to take note of. The very date that that warship showed up and started firing those Tomahawk cruise missiles was the 1-year anniversary of the United States entering World War I. Now they're stating in the press, almost 1 year to the day, this has happened. Now, this article does go on. And, you know, there's some things that need to be sort of pointed out. You know, and I will try to find this article here in the meantime because, you know, there's been questions about the infamous White Hat Group that is the one responsible for giving this report with the films that have been released, the pictures, so on and so forth. Now, when you look into this, you keep running into the infamous brick wall of who it's being reported by, and there's a very large article, I believe, that was in The Guardian. I'm trying to find it as we speak. All right, here we go. And let me pull that up in the browser. We have an article that came out of The Guardian in 2017, December 18th, how Syria's white helmets became victims of an online propaganda machine. Now, the unfortunate thing is, you know, it's good to look at what we're dealing with source material here. And when we look deeper into this, we do realize that there's some reality behind some of the things stated by the folks over in the infamous, as they label them, propaganda, fake news department, conspiracists, you know, so on and so forth. The fact alone that the white helmets are receiving the vast majority of their funding from Western sources is what really catches your attention. Now, my point being with this, if there is questions concerning the white helmets, then we need to have multiple sources on the ground confirming this. Now, folks, look, we know full well that we have intelligence agents throughout the world that have connections on the ground in Syria. We need further backing for these alleged chemical attacks that just happened to be brought forward. We have, I am sure, beyond any shadow of a doubt, I would not be surprised that we have CIA operatives. We probably have Israeli operatives operating there. We probably have MI5, MI6. You get the picture. France has already got troops on the ground. We found this out last week. Kurdish news source out of, off the top of my head was Erbil. I can't remember exactly where they're located, but nonetheless, Radar.net, you got Kurdistan 24, basically reported that there's already French forces on the ground. Now, the reason I am stating that we need to look at this very closely is due to this. Everybody think back, at least bare minimum, it was about a month ago. We reported on this on the End Time Tribune when it was happening. Multiple Western nations, including the United States, had stated that if there is a chemical attack by Bashar al-Assad's forces, this is a red line, and they are all going to take action. We had multiple reports coming out about this through Reuters, through AP, so on and so forth. We had them coming from France, if I remember correctly, Britain, United States, all stating the same thing. This also comes on the cusp of what Donald Trump had told everybody at this Steelworkers Union gathering that he had not long back, where it first started to float that he was going to pull everybody out of Syria. You know, the timing of this, as Russia is beginning to clear out one of the last strongholds of the rebel forces, you know, they're about declaring that a vast majority of this is pretty much done. We just had these talks in Turkey, between Turkey, Iran, and Russia, which were an extension of the original talks that happened in Astana, Kazakhstan. You know, this is all on the crux of this after we get all these reports coming from Western nations stating that if this happens, this is the red line and we are going to leap in. Now, this is the same thing on top of it that Trump stated on his Twitter account, which now apparently that's his new press release, public opinion. We all know what's going on there. But nonetheless, he, of course, singled out Obama not going over the red line. Now, here's the issue with that. And we had talked about this on either one of the videos over on the Bands of Time on YouTube, or it was on the End Time Tribune. It has come to light since the events that happened during the time of Obama, which was the first time that warships were scrambled to Cyprus, a.k.a. Kittim in the Bible. And what does it tell us next? Forces from him, the Assyrians, shall rise. What happened after that? Islamic State rose up, a.k.a. ISIS. If you go over to my website at overtattentionshow.com, if you look over on the right, there is an archive that was saved for us by one of our faithful listeners, Deb, that has all of those programs in there. And you can even find when we talked about the program where we stated to watch Cyprus, to watch Kittim, and then lo and behold, within next to no time, these warships started scrambling there. We have covered ISIS and its connections to the forces from him will arise. There's 2 programs in that archive that you can also go and listen to hear work that we did on this. I had done at that stage, I had gone through tons of work on the Islamic State, 2 different books, and not to even mention multiple documentaries. Okay, we found out a lot of other details there as well. For instance, I'll bring one little tidbit up. One of the things we cover in those is the fact that in the Greek, it states some very interesting things when you look at the Septuagint. Now, we have talked time and time again, Matthew has brought up the Bible source code. Septuagint, the Textus Receptus, and on the other side, the Hebrew with the Delitzsch's Hebrew modern translation. But nonetheless, you are going to find out in that there's a Greek word that is translated spermatos. It states that forces from his seed shall arise. And we had found an extensive database of documentation of all the historical places that the Assyrians uprooted people and where they moved them. Okay, the next step was, unfortunately, this is the way it is. It may sound a little crude, but nonetheless, we saw the exact same thing happen with Genghis Khan and the Mongols. They breed into those populations, hence the seed. Okay? So now, on top of it, we have historical backed documentation linking these people to the Assyrian at that stage in history. So I hope I gave a general enough explanation of that. But nonetheless, and I guess stopping here for a moment and even bringing this situation in with Donald Trump's statement that ISIS has been completely, for the most part, taken out in Syria. Well, there's reports on the ground and even on the Iraqi border going into Iraq as well that ISIS is flaring up again. And making matters worse, we have the Khorasan group of ISIS that is flaring up between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and going through that corridor up into Iran as well. Now, in that archive as well, there's a program that we did in there entitled The Black Flags of Khorasan. I cannot state this enough. You need to understand and look into the Black Flags of Khorasan prophecies in the Islamic text. That's why they used the specific flag they did. This is why, on top of it, that this Khorasan group of ISIS becomes very important. We have also had reported flare-ups in the Sinai now for quite some time that Sisi in Egypt has been trying to deal with, and it's been causing, there's been problems like no tomorrow there. The first group of soldiers that Sisi sent in there, they essentially were almost slaughtered to the man. Okay, now when we consider what's going on with the Gaza Strip, the fact is, on top of it, the border there to Israel, between the Gaza Strip to Egypt, is closed down. Not to even mention the fact that on the other side of that, they're dealing with ISIS at the same time. Not to even to mention how many other Islamist groups are mixed in. And it's almost to stop there too, folks, is I would really state that you might want to look into the meaning of that terminology as opposed to what Islam is, what Muslims are, so on and so forth. The history of it is excruciatingly important, where it began with the West, starting with Britain, basically backing right-wing Islamic political movements that led to the Pan-Arabs, so on and so forth. This started in running up towards the late 1800s and moved forward. In 1928, of course, we had the Muslim Brotherhood come into the equation. This just goes on and on. But nonetheless, now, as I'm stating, there's a reason that we need multiple sources confirming this attack. We don't, essentially, because we're not there right now, we don't know who actually has done this. So, personally myself, that's kind of the way I am. If there is going to be something launched, some kind of military action, then we need to see why. And There's other articles here that go into this because that's one I don't exactly, not a news source I trust. Sorry, folks. I'm a little bit picky with those things. Because we have one coming out of the Independent here out of the UK. Foreign Office has spent over $1 million on U.S. lobbying on behalf of Syrian opposition. But let's see here. Could have sworn that I had another one. We have an article here from William Engdahl. I do have a certain amount of respect for the work he's done, but nonetheless, that's also, I do have a few issues here and there with source material that's being cited. Now, one that should catch everybody's attention, though, is one that came out of Newsweek.com. This one is entitled Syria's White Helmet Subject of Oscar-Winning Film Caught Dumping Dead Soldiers, Fire Volunteer. And let me pull this up. This was released on June 22nd of 2017. So once again, this comes out of Newsweek.com. Go out and look at this article. And it's we also have another link to Qatar, and I'm trying to find that link right there, which, all considering everything that's going on in Qatar, with the accusations against them that they're backing Muslim Brotherhood, that they're backing this terrorist organization, they're backing that terrorist organization. We've had the blockade come into effect, the accusations of the connections with Iran. But when we look at this even deeper, it was about a couple of months ago, I believe, even a month, that we found out that Jared Kushner and his father's business had a big falling out with a major deal in Qatar, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, this blockade of Qatar takes place. Now, this is a major development that it hits the media from time to time, and then once again, it disappears. But we've, on the End Time Tribune, I have brought up many, many times about what's been going on with Jared Kushner. We got multiple people that are tied into this. When we just had the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, just had his great big tour throughout the whole United States. All kinds of odd stuff went on during that. Once again, I'm not going to go really deeply into that. I've spent time talking about this on our other program. I would look into that. Now, there's an announcement today on top of it that he is now in Paris. He's in France at the same time that Macron and Trump have both come out condemning this attack. Now, folks, another thing to take note of is Saudi Arabia has been behind many of these rebel forces fighting against Bashar al-Assad. And, we had years back, we had an infographic explaining the depth of who all the forces were that were fighting in Syria. And it was enough to blow your mind. It's another thing I would advise going out there and looking into. But right now, the main one that keeps coming up, obviously, is the Free Syrian Army. We've just had the actions with Erdogan in Turkey, as well with the invasion of Afrin. That also adds into this equation. And this is where things get a little bit odd, because now Turkey's condemning the Syrian regime for this alleged attack. We've been wondering for quite some time what in the world is going on with Turkey in this equation, because while all of this has been happening, when they go into Afrin, there's been reports of just on a wide scale of things not being, in lack of better terms, kosher with what happened there in Turkey, or in Syria, in Afrin. Reports of looting, all kinds of other things going on. A massive humanitarian crisis caused, once again, the Kurds being attacked. And this has been a big fight between the United States White House and Turkey for quite some time, because obviously the United States has been arming varied groups within the Kurdish people that they consider terror organizations. Now, if everybody remembers last year, on top of it, the announcement that came out that stated the CIA was no longer going to fund the rebel forces fighting against Assad in Syria. Okay, it's been admitted by our administration, by the CIA, so on and so forth, that we were actively funding and backing the forces fighting against Assad. Now, why does this matter? Well, we go back again once to that infographic. Now, these accusations that have been made concerning the White Helmets. The accusations are that they are tied in with al-Nusra, which is a branch of al-Qaeda. Now, as I said before, the issue is trying to confirm the source material on these accusations, and that's where things get a little bit shady. The argument behind one of the main people that is stating this, it looks good on paper. There are things that are backed up when you go and start looking at who the funding is coming from, which is all through varied Western nations for the White Helmets. Article that I pulled out of the GulfTimes.com. You know, once again, we have Qatar right here, signs pact to support Syrian White Helmets. Okay, so this is right out of the Gulf Times that we have this. And you can start checking into it and you'll find out exactly as I'm stating. So, as I pointed out again, you know, I'd stated in the past that the White Helmets, well, there's that probable connection. But I think we're dealing with a fog of war scenario here. Because that's what we're dealing with across the board. All over the world, that's the only way to explain this. We have what is being told to us in the Western sources. I pointed out time and time again that, you know, the best way to look at this is, you know, the terminology of how they changed it to basically stir up public support for these things. You go back into the history, you find out who was behind that. It's a long, drawn-out situation. But I mean, the clearest illustration is what we had happen here in the United States after the September 11th attacks of 2001, and then further moving forward into 2003 with the invasion into Iraq. Now, of course, we had the entire Western media in the United States, Britain, and other countries throughout Europe, Eastern Europe, so on and so forth, stating that we had direct ties between the leader there of Iraq at the time. Sorry, it's escaping my memory here, but nonetheless, everybody knows who that is. And Al-Qaeda, and not to even mention the infamous weapons of mass destruction. Okay, the entire thing has been proved beyond any shadow of a doubt. Now, this is all over the place out there through verifiable, reputable sources that the whole thing was a fraud. There's no connections that tied them to Al-Qaeda. There's no weapons of mass destruction that were ever found. And the deeper you look into it, you find out their source on top of it took it from that infamous movie way back upon a time where they said they saw the sarin gas capsules, and he described the little tubes in that movie that had Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery in it. Out there on Alcatraz or something or another. And that's exactly what the guy quoted, for Pete's sakes. So, you know, people, this is where we just have to look directly at all these details. Okay, and this goes into explaining why I chose the name of Overt Attention Show. Overt Attention is scoping in on one specific area and focusing directly on it to see what in the world is going on. You know, there's the opposite terminology, covert. You know, covert are things that we're not going to see. Why? Okay, well, for security purposes, a lot of these things are obviously going to be what? Classified. It's a little dangerous when you start releasing material like that. It can cause all kinds of issues. We have a lot of people that come out of working within varied portions in the government, be it, you know, within the CIA. We've had a guy from the Justice Department that I've spoke of several times, and, you know, other people within inside of the government that have come out, written books on what they saw with their own eyes, but at the same time, they have a cool-off period that they have to be censored by whatever agency it was due to security purposes. Now, those are sources I like to go to quite a bit with the books that I buy and even articles and so on and so forth, because these you can verify what is being said, especially when it lines up with multiple witnesses across the board. So this is where I go to look for material. When you come across something like this with the accusations against the white helmets, well, then you kind of have to look deeper. So, you know, we don't know exactly what's about to happen here, but it's coming down the barrel quick with whatever decision these Western nations make. The timing of this is peculiar. Hopefully, if this is a justified attack, we have more sources that are coming forward with absolute verification. If they're just basing this off of the one witness coming from these videos inside of Syria, that is a problem, folks. So hopefully we get more information about this in the days coming. I don't like to float too far down the conspiratorial circles. So this is why I'm taking a lot of time to explain this very topic specifically, because you're going to see this come up all over. Now, again, the white helmets are going to be brought into the public circle, and you're going to start seeing all kinds of things stated. But that's where we need to check the facts. Right now, I can't say one way or the other. I've seen enough evidence that makes things look a little odd, but I'm not 100% going to state that they are definitely like I had previously thought. So this is where we have to go back, folks. We have to look over all of these things before we rush to judgments on them. I don't know, once again. You know, but here's another point to add into this. Now, what bothers me in this is the resemblance of where we have gotten the intelligence concerning the quote-unquote Iranian nuclear program. You know, the intelligence comes out of a group that's now inside of Iraq. It's been labeled a terrorist organization. On top of it, when the Iranian protests were breaking out there in 79, at one point in time, they came across the border and started just lighting everybody up, shooting everybody around them. So they had been labeled a terrorist organization ages ago. And you go straight to their website. I believe it's INRA off the top of my head. I can't remember here at the moment. I've got quite a few different articles linked to them over on overtattentionshow.com that you can see who they are, and their stated purpose is to get handed the reins of Iran in the midst of regime change. And this is where we keep getting this continued intelligence that is stating that Iran is in the midst of trying to attempt to build nuclear weapons. Okay, they've been coming up nonstop in the media earlier this year when we had the protests that broke out in Iran. You had accusations that the CIA was behind these protests. You know, the atypical infamous circle started spinning again because obviously we're not getting much information about Iran and what's going on there, but there were accusations against the Kurdish people that are over there that they were working hand in hand with the CIA in the midst of an attempted regime change, so on and so forth. Were they really? Again, I don't know. You know, some 20 years down the line, if and when things are declassified, then we would possibly know. But it's my case in point. The intel that kept being spread concerning the fact that Iran was trying to build nuclear weapons, that intel was coming from these groups. Now, I do have a couple of different books here that cover the history of Mossad and go into some of these details. And, you know, there's varied things that are pointed out in there as well. So, you know, for certain, what was going on in Iran, everybody is pretty much scratching their head going, we're not sure. The Ayatollah at the time of the war between Iraq and Iran, back around the infamous time of the Iran-Contra scandal was all taking place, at that time, the Ayatollah came forward, the religious leaders, the mullahs, so on and so forth, stating that we do not use chemical weapons. They could have retaliated against Iraq in the same way when the chemical weapons were used on them, and they didn't. So the statements are also made that they also don't stand behind nuclear weapons as well. I've heard rumor out of one of the books, too, that Mossad said they started that. I don't know. And that's kind of, there was a interview on Vice News about the whole topic, where even the main host on Vice News stated the exact same thing, because the deeper you look, you just walk away shaking your head. But, this is the point. If we have these sources that don't seem to be giving us 100% of these details that are absolutely confirmed, and if we've got nations making decisions based on things like, for instance, this group that's in Iraq that is calling for a regime change and the overthrow in Iran, then something's not right. So we need to see a little bit more evidence here in this circumstance. And that even goes with what happened in the 2 previous attacks. There really never was anything 100% substantiated. Of course, the Western press says that we verified it. And then, of course, you have on the other side of the equation, you have Russia, Syria, and all the people aligned with them stating it's not verified. Again, fog of war. We're not on the ground. We'll never know. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So we have to deal with what we have in front of us. All right, sorry about that. I had to take a little bit of a breather here and get some water in. But with that in mind, I think it might be time here for a break. Be back in a few minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. It appears my internet is having problems and I'm getting disconnected. I'm on a wireless connection in my room, so this seems to happen from time to time. But nonetheless, now to continue on where we're at. Now, we just had a couple more stories come out here 4 minutes ago from the Jerusalem Post. This is probably no different than what was released earlier out of Haaretz.com. We have here that this came from NBC News. Israel informed Washington ahead of Syria strike on airbase, U.S. officials say, according to U.S. News. Israel informed the United States of its plans to attack in Syria overnight. Two U.S. officials told NBC News on Monday morning. The officials confirmed that it was the Israeli military that carried out the strikes on an airbase in Syria, something Israel has not officially acknowledged as part of its policy of not directly taking responsibility for actions in the Syrian arena. Under the Obama administration, Israel complained about a number of occasions in which U.S. officials leaked to news outlets that Israel was responsible for strikes in Syria. This time, however, Israel has already been publicly blamed for the attack by Russia, which has denounced the attack. Still, a confirmation from American officials about an action that Israel is not officially taking responsibility for is an unusual event in the relationship between the two countries. So that is sort of late and breaking in the last probably hour and a half, I think, is when I actually found that. Now to get into why I called this program what I did. Because, well, we're dealing with the biblical Hamath. And it was in the region of Homs in Syria where the SAR strike happened. Now, giving a little idea, Homs, previously known as Emesa or Emesa in the Greek, is a city in western Syria of the Homs Governorate. It is 500 meters above sea level. Okay, we get the idea here. But nonetheless, this is where things really kick in. It's etymology. The origin of the city's modern name is that it is an Arabic form of the city's Latin name, Emesis, derived from the Greek Emesa or Emesos, Himasa. The name Emesa or Himasa was derived from the Aramean city of Hamath Zobah. The latter is a combination of Hamath, which in Hebrew means fortress, same with Syrian or Syriac, and Zobah, which that word means nearness. Thus, the name collectively means the fortress of surrounding, which refers to the citadel of Homs and the encircling plains. So, folks, this is a little important concerning biblically speaking. I'll give a little more detail here. Some nice little things to pay attention to. For approximately 2,000 years, Homs has served as a key agricultural market, production site, and trade center for the villages of northern Syria. It has also provided security services to the hinterland of Syria, protecting it from invading forces. Excavations at the citadel of Homs indicated the earliest settlement of the site dates back to 2000 BC. Biblical scholars have identified the city with Hamath of Zobah mentioned in the Bible in 1274 BC. A battle took place between the forces of the Egyptian Empire under Ramses II and the Hittite Empire under Muthala II at the city of Kadesh on the Orontes River near Homs. It was possibly the largest chariot battle ever fought. All right, folks, this is the infamous Battle of Kadesh. Now, if you know a little bit about the corrected chronology work that has been going on, such as by, for instance, David Roll, who we have interviewed over at the End Time Tribune, you're going to kind of come to understand that, yes, the Battle of Kadesh is in the Bible. Now, we move forward with the Roman rule. Homs itself may have been founded by Seleucus Nictator, who established the Seleucid Empire upon the death of Alexander the Great. Although the city did not emerge in the light of history until the 1st century BC, at this time, Greek philosopher Strabo spoke of a tent-dwelling tribe called the Amazani living in the area around the Orontes and south of the Apamea region. They were an Arab tribe in the area and settled in Emesa, which is derived from the name from them. Upon Pompey's incorporation of the Seleucid state of Syria into the Roman Empire in 64 BC, the Amazani dynasty were confirmed in their rule as client kings of the Roman for aiding their troops in various wars. Their chief at the time, Ramesses I, gained the status of king of Emesa, but the capital of Ara, Susa, the city of Emesa, also along the Oronte rivers. At its greatest extent, the kingdom's boundaries extended from Becca village in the west to the border of Palmyra, with the east from Yabred to South Al-Rastan in the northern kingdom of Sarmabeses I, the first of Rome's Arab clients on the desert fringes. This goes on into a lot more details. But nonetheless, then you can go in and look at Hamath Zobah, place in ancient Aramea related to the Aramean state of Zobah, which extended from the Becca Valley along the eastern side of the anti-Lebanon mountain, reaching Hamath to the north and Damascus to the south. According to 2 Chronicles, it was conquered by Solomon and thus figured in his only military engagement alluded to in the book of Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 8:3. Hamath and Zobah were likely adjoining kingdoms, whence the compound name Habath Zobah, an idea supported by mention of wars between Hadazar of Zobah and Tol of Hamath in 2 Samuel 8:9 through 10. According to Martin J. Selman, the existence of a joint name Hamath Zobah indicated that by the time of Solomon, the two kingdoms had joined into a single polity. And again, this goes in and explains the exact same thing here. The combination of the Hebrew fortress and Zobah, meaning nearness, collectively meaning the fortress surrounding, which refers to the citadel of Homs and the encircling plains. Now, we have a little more here. We pull this up from Britannica.com. Homs Arabic hymns, city, central Syria. The city is situated near the Orontes River at the eastern end of Syria's only natural gateway from the Mediterranean coast to the interior. It occupies the site of ancient Emesa, which contained a great temple to the sun god El-Gabal, Aramaic Latin El-Gabalas. Emesa was ruled by a line of priest kings throughout the Roman Empire. Two of its nobility rose to become emperor, and Elblagas and Severus Alexander Aurelian reigned from 270 to 275 AD. Made the towns his headquarters, and their defeated queen Zenobia of Palmyra. It was taken in 636 by the Muslims, who renamed it Homs, hymns, and the city's large Christian element was eliminated during the rebellion of 855 when the churches were demolished and the Christians executed or deported. Homs later in 1516 passed into Ottoman hands, where it remained except for a brief period of Egyptian control in the 1830s until the creation of Syria after World War I. How Sykes-Picot. Now, of course, this goes on. We do not need to cover that, though, folks. Look these up. One of these is just the infamous simple Wikipedia, but nonetheless, I'm not a fan of Wikipedia. They've gotten source material sometimes, and you see source not cited, and if you can't check that source, it really takes away from it. But nonetheless, the parts that I did state from as far as the etymology, the early history is backed up. Now, take note of the fact that it brings up the Seleucids, okay? Because we've, over on the End Time Tribune throughout the years, we've spoken many times about the prophecy concerning the he-goat and the four horns which come up. Isochronally, which what that means is there's nothing new under the sun. That which is that which will be. History repeats itself as we know it through the standard regular circles. This is what God has been telling us all along, that history repeats itself. We were to understand that in these last days, as it states in Daniel 8, referring to that prophecy that we needed to look at what happened then when Alexander the Great collided with the realm of Media and Persia, which, mind you, happened where? Well, the current area where Kurdistan's located at, just in eyeshot of Erbil, is where the first confrontation between Alexander the Great and the last king of the Persian Empire, Darius III, I believe, off the top of my head. Now, the Diadachi, the four horns. Now, the Diadachi is complicated because there's many that will go into the school of saying, well, this has already happened. But here's the problem. When you study the history of the Diadachi, you're going to notice there's 3 kings, 4 kings, divides happening, this, that, and the other thing, all kinds of things happening during that time frame. But we have a shadow and a silhouette from ancient history with what happened with the Diadachi, and we have the Seleucids being brought up with this. What is this telling us? What we've been seeing all along anyways, because it has been on a continual basis, it's been coming into the media, especially concerning what's happening here with the announcement expected in May if Donald Trump is going to keep the Iranian nuclear accords. And that coincides with all of the other activity going on. We spoke about this, sources that were gathered together by the Jerusalem Post, stating that they expect war by May. But here's the issue. What is happening right now as we speak? And I think that's what we need to be concerned with, because this whole thing flared up Saturday, and it's already moving along at lightning speed. We have now accusations, reports stating that Israel was behind the strikes here and took out, in the article I looked at, I believe it says 14. Yes, here from AP News, Israel blamed for missile strike in Syria, 14 reported dead. And who are they? Okay, let's see here. Russia and the Syrian military blamed Israel for a pre-dawn missile attack Monday on a major airbase in central Syria, saying Israeli fighters launched the missiles from Lebanon's airspace. A war monitoring group said the airstrikes killed 15 people, including Iranians active in Syria. Excuse me, sorry about that there, folks. I had to cough. Didn't want to do that into the mic. But nonetheless, that's where we take it back to the article I read previous to that was released from Arut Shava on the 8th, which explains in detail all of the buildup that has been happening there along the northern border of Israel between Lebanon and Syria. Now, most notably, people, your mind should shift a little bit towards Daniel 11 with the king of the north, the king of the south, all of that. Something we've talked about in times past. You will see in there the God of fortresses, all sorts of things going on there in Daniel 11 that we might want to take a deeper look at a different time, but I plan to do that with Matthew in the future. But, let us take a look here at what's going on with this word, the Hebrew word for Hamath. Now, the link that I put into the show notes is going to take you over to a site that Matthew and I have used for several years, obohu.cz, which is the Translation Bible website. Now, with my program that I use here, which is the Word, that we have set up in a specific way with the text, I'm actually getting 60 verses that are coming up from this Hebrew word for Hams, or Hamath. Now, the quote that I used for the show notes, folks, many people, as they've seen these attacks happen before in Syria with the chemical attacks, have immediately become concerned, is this what we're looking at, the oracle concerning Damascus? Now, this is the prophecy from Jeremiah 49, verse 23. Let me read this stanza, because as you get here if you got your little headings above it there, it says prophecy against Damascus. We can sometimes ignore those, but it's very helpful in this. Concerning Damascus, Hamath and Arpad are put to shame, for they have heard bad news. They are disheartened. There's anxiety by the sea. It cannot be calmed. Damascus has become helpless. She has turned away to flee, and panic has gripped her. Distress and pangs have taken hold of her like a woman in childbirth. How the city of praise has not been deserted, the town of my joy. Therefore her young men will fall in her streets, and all the men of war will be silenced in that day, declares the Lord of hosts. And I shall set fire to a wall of Damascus, and it will devour the fortified towers of Ben-Hadad. Once again, is this what we're seeing now? Irregardless of anything, it will be leading in that direction at some point. But the main point that I wanted to look into here was the fact alone of where the location of that base was, being near Homs, which is the biblical Hamath. Yet, there's more. That word also in the Hebrew, in the search, is going to show up with another definition, which is H2534, I believe, if I can see that correctly, which poison the accusations being made against Syria as we speak, a burning anger and a rage. But, what else do we have in here? Because we bring up 60-some verses here, folks. I mean, you almost have to wonder. I'm just taking a look at the time here. I'm at 35 minutes. So, but, our first, for instance, of this, we show up here in Genesis 27, verse 4, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury subsides. Now, historically speaking, this comes up numerous times. Isaiah 10, verse 9. This is when what? Syria is God's instrument. Woe to those who enact evil statutes and those who constantly record unjust decision, so as to deprive the needy of justice and to rob the poor of my people of their rights, in order that widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans. Now, what will you do in the day of punishment and in the devastation which will come from afar? To whom will you flee for help? And where will you remain? Where will you leave your wealth? Nothing remains but to crouch among the captives or fall among the slain. In spite of all, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hand is my indignation. I sent it against a godless nation and commissioned it against the people of my fury to capture booty and seize plunder and to trample them down like mud in the streets. Yet it does not so intend, nor does it plan so in its heart, but rather it is its purpose to destroy and to cut off many nations. For it says, are not my princes all kings? Is not Calno like Carchemish, or Hamath like Arpad, or Samaria like Damascus? As my hand has reached to the kingdom of the idols, whose graven images were greater than those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not do to Jerusalem and her images, just as I have done to Samaria and her idols? This goes on, folks, and just go in and read all these chapters. Now, like I said, I included the link in the show notes that'll at least give you the 57, and I can obviously make up some notes here that will put all 60 verses over at my website at overattentionshow.com. We have the same thing repeated again in Isaiah 36, verse 19. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? And what have they delivered? And when have they delivered Samaria from my hand? Isaiah 37:13. Where's the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of Sepharvaim and of Hena and Eva? And where does this tie into? Hezekiah. Sennacherib, the threats being leveled at them at the time of Hezekiah and Ahaz's 10 steps. Take note of that. Matthew and I have a program in the works that will be done at some point here in the future concerning this. We have developments in our universe, on the ground, on the earth, that need to be addressed. And this comes up when we look at it. Now, I have brought up Rabshakeh and the infamous quote-unquote propaganda that was being used out of his mouth at this point in time. You know, obviously, because what do we have going on all the time here? Fake news. Well, that's what they state. But this is at the time of that threat. Yeah, and I mean, well, you know, to make note of that, the first infamous propaganda that is the easiest one to see is the infamous Bison inscription with Darius the Great. You don't know what I'm talking about? We have a program about it called A Kingdom Divided Against Itself over on the Bands of Time YouTube channel. And it will explain quite in depth what happened there with Darius the Great as he seized the throne and ended the line of Cyrus the Great, the king of Anshan. Whereas Anshan, that's in Elam, or what you would refer to as modern day Iran. Okay, taking that a step forward. Where do we get that name from? Finding located down by in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. Top of my head. It's been a while since I looked at that, but nonetheless, it's in that area. That's where we get the modern name for Iran, where he states, I'm an Aryan from Arya, and then I-R-A-N, transliterated from what he stated. Now, looking at Isaiah 51, verse 20. Oh, and before we go on, let me point out to you folks that and to be called Persia. Just keep that in mind. Have fainted there, full of their for his people. Behold, I have taken out of your hand the cup of reeling, the chalice of my anger. You will never drink it again. And I will walk over it. Jeremiah 6, verse 11. Once again, this is wrath. But I am full of the wrath of the Lord. I am weary with holding it in. Pour it out on the children in the street and on the gathering of the young men together. For both husbands and wife shall be taken, the aged and the very old. Jeremiah 39, verse 5. Chaldeans pursued them, overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. And they seized him and brought him up to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, at Riblah in the land of Hamath, and he passed sentence on him. Then the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah before the eyes of Riblah. The king of Babylon also slew the nobles of Judah. Now, folks, I've pointed this out on the End Time Tribune. Take note of the fact that there is no such thing as a quote-unquote Babylonian. You had the Amorites, for instance, that ruled over it early on. You had the Chaldeans. Well, who are the Chaldeans? The Bands of Time YouTube channel, we did a program about the Queen of Heaven. You end up finding out that they were all birthed through the loins of one queen, and she was an Assyrian. So they are part Assyrian. That's who the Chaldeans are. It's a little more complex than that. I'm not going to go into it at this point in time, but nonetheless, we know from the inscription found that this one queen had birthed all of these kings from Nebuchadnezzar and forward. And it could have even been a few before him. And yes, this is backed up with historical data, inscriptions, the whole 9 yards, as they stated. Okay, we've already covered that one. Jeremiah 52, verse 9. Then they captured the king, brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah in the land of Hamath, and passed sentence on him. Jeremiah 52, verse 27, the king of Babylon struck them down and put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was led away into exile from its land. And then we have this come up between Ezekiel 47:16, 47:17, 47:20, and 48:1. I'd pay attention to that. But I know Matthew would get after me if I don't bring this one up. From Asaph. The Psalms of Asaph, folks. This shows up in 76, verse 10. For the wrath of man shall praise you. With the remnant of wrath thou shalt gird thyself. Once again, go through and read that entire psalm, folks. As a matter of fact, read the entire chapter of all of these, as you should always do. Okay, we have this up here in Psalms 140, verse 3. They sharpen their tongues as a serpent. Poison of a viper is under their lips. Selah. What? Moving forward. Hosea 7, verse 5. On the day of our king, the princes become sick with the heat of wine. He stretched out his hand with scoffers. Comes up twice in Amos 6, folks. Go over to Calneh and look, and go from there to Hamath the Great. Then go down to Gath of the Philistines. Are they better than these kingdoms, or is their territory greater than yours? Comes up again in 6 verse 14. For behold, I am going to raise up a nation against you, O house of Israel, declares the Lord God of hosts. And they will afflict you from the entrance of Hamath to the brooks of Arabah. Zechariah 9 verse 2. And Hamath, which also borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. Folks, as stated, I've only gone through a few of these. With 60 verses, there's a lot here. Now, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, another one to point out. Because this is in Esther 2. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. I keep that one in mind because I think that's something we're going to have to come back to in the future here in a different episode. Now, where do we have this showing up in the New Testament? Again, this is DeLeach's Modern Hebrew Bible. When we have this showing up here in Acts 21, verse 35. And when he got to the stairs, it so happened that he was carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. Move forward to Romans 3, verse 13. Their throat is an open grave. With their tongues they keep deceiving. The poison of asps is under their lips. And where is this? This comes from Psalms 5, verse 9. Psalms 140, verse 3, which we covered earlier. And again, of course, in James 3, verse 8. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. And then we go into the book of Revelations. And this is where it really begins to catch your attention. Once again, as I stated before, this is, in one of the definitions, this is wrath. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Revelation 14, verse 8. And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. So again, in 14, verse 10, the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb. And what is this? Doom for worshipers of the beast, as this subheading states. Again, it's in 14, verse 19. An angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Revelation 15, verse 7. And one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. Revelation 16, verse 1. And I heard a loud voice from the temple saying, to the 7 angels, go and pour out the 7 bowls of the wrath of God onto the earth. Revelation 16, verse 19. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and Babylon the Great remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Revelation 18, verse 3. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. Last time is in Revelation 19, verse 15. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may smite the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. Well, folks, the Bands of Time, we have done a program entitled America in Prophecy. Okay? To explain here for people that aren't familiar with this quickly. In the Greek, in Ezekiel 38 or 39, the top of my head, Greek word in there is Amerinos. America was named after Amerigos Vespucci. This is a long, drawn-out explanation of its history. The New World and Babylon, yes, have always been one and the same. Once again, you can go over to the Bands of Time on YouTube.com, where we did an entire program on this about America in Prophecy. Everything that's been happening here with the United States. We have all these trade wars happening. In the midst of all that, now all of a sudden, we have Trump speaking to his main military advisors. Who knows what's going to happen here? Are they going to strike? Are they still going to pull out? I don't know. But when we look at the context of everything else that's being stated just from the few verses here that I pointed out, and even with venom and a poison figuratively, this is all connected somehow. All of it. So, folks, I would really have to say, keep an eye on this, because this is about to get hot. And you know what? I'm going to have a surprise here. I'll have to see if this works. I'm going to try to add in Matthew. Shouldn't have done it this way, but oh well. Matthew.
Yes.
Do we have you? Because I brought you in live here for the last few minutes. I figured, why not? Perfect timing.
Sure. Let me get my headphones on. You're probably echoing from my speakers, but just a second.
Yeah, let me. You have to mute myself as well here. Go ahead.
Okay, Bri, you got me?
Sorry, indeed I do. I had to unmute real fast. Go ahead.
All right. So what is going on? Checking your link here. I mean, I just got home. Everybody needs to understand that I just got home from work. So what have you been talking about? Get me up to speed real quick while I take a look at this.
Well, I mean, we're really dealing here with the developments between what just happened here between the chemical attack on Saturday in the middle of the night. Israeli jets, or at least the accusations are being made. Now it's being stated by NBC News that sources say in the White House that Israel contacted them before the strikes, which happened near Homs. Well, Homs is the biblical Hamath, but the Hebrew word for it means two different things as well. It's Hamath, and it's a word for wrath.
Right, wrath, yeah. Wow, so we've got pictures of white helmets here. Oh my goodness.
Well, and that's something I discussed earlier as well to point out to people. This is a little bit hard. There's accusations that have been made that they're associated with Al-Qaeda, but then our sourcing material, we're running into the fog of war. We don't know what's true and what's not true in this. If they are associated with El-Nusra, which is an affiliate of Al-Qaeda, or not. It could be nonsense. It might not be. We don't know. But as I pointed out, we have to have multiple sources on the ground, and we know full well that all of these nations have intelligence assets that are there on the ground. So we have to have some kind of backing if there's going to be actions taken. I remember weeks back what they stated, all the Western nations, when they came out going, we're going to launch an attack. If anything happens with the chemical attack in Syria, and then, Russia and Syria announced they're cleaning out one of their last strongholds, and then lo and behold, this happens in the midst of it. The timing is a little too peculiar in light of everything else that's going on.
Well, I have to disagree with you there. The timing is impeccable.
Well, exactamundo. I guess that's
give me a break.
Best way to put it.
Give me a break. Okay, and I like this article that you sent me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something to you. This is a group photo of 6 women. And it says to save one life is to save all of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, you better get a really good clue really quick, because these are all obviously Arab women. Now, if you need a hint, you better get a clue real quick. These women are brought into the West, and of course they're feminized because what? They have no rights in their own country. So this, ladies and gentlemen, I've ran into these people on more than one occasion on the campuses of institutions of higher learning. So this just stinks to high heaven to me all over the place. But the timing is too impeccable. And look, we've got the same exact thing going on in the Gaza Strip right now. Me and Brian was talking about this privately. Look, there is no way to tell. We would have to get the medical records of the wounds incurred by those snipers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand that everybody is there. Every single enemy of Israel is there. We have to understand that the Gazans themselves, they are probably not to blame. But I guarantee you that we have every terrorist cell there. Those people, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think ISIS was doing? They were attacking mostly Muslims, and either you converted and joined ISIS or they beheaded you. So, ladies and gentlemen, get a clue. It would take nothing to take a small caliber handgun into that crowd, shoot somebody, anybody that was wearing what? A press vest. You shoot them at point blank range, but still, the medical records would determine if that was a heavy caliber, high velocity round from a sniper gun. There's no way any IDF officer would take a shot at anybody wearing a press vest. It just wouldn't happen. So now we have this going on in Syria. This is tit for tat. And if you can't see it, you're blind as a bat. Okay? We have got instigators all across the board, and all of them have one singular thought in mind: war. And they're going to kill anybody, in whatever, by whatever means possible. They intend to murder as many innocent people as possible. So let me make sure I'm clear. The Muslim extremists are at work at the Gaza Strip. The West is at work in Syria. The timing, look, you all know that even a blood moon occurs with absolute precision. If you can't step back and see that all this is occurring at the same window of opportunity, you need to turn off the entertainment industry and come to grips with where it is you're at. Because where you're at is not safe. It's just not. Now, we don't even know. We can't even read Iranian news. We have no idea if actual F-35s were chronicled over Iranian sovereign airspace. But if they were, ladies and gentlemen, you're being forced to go somewhere you cannot return from. Let's look at the other side. I mean, there's three sides to this pyramid. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States comes out and he says, yeah, Saudi Arabia is thinking about, building some nuclear plants. And by the way, we've already got American contractors that is bidding on it. Oh, my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, wake up. If you think the IDF is going to allow any Muslim country within striking range of the Israeli border, you're acting like an adolescent that is addicted to comic books. That's not going to happen. And what we're really talking about here is this. Riddle me this, ladies and gentlemen. We already know absolute certainty what happened to the French reactor that was being built in Iraq. Now, as soon as the Israelis got their new shipment of F-16s, they modified them, sent them into Iraq, and blew that puppy to oblivion. That is exactly, therefore, what they're going to do to the one in Saudi Arabia. Only we got massive problems this time, ladies and gentlemen. You better wake up. Because this time it's not going to be the French getting hit. It's going to be American contractors.
Well, I mean, what do you think about the fact on top of it, too, that this is all happening the very day that Mr. Bolton is now moving into his position, who has always advocated for striking Syria? Just, you know, we have Trump saying, no, we're going to pull out. We have a chemical attack. Now he's talking with all the chief brass about the next move. We got UN meetings happening. This is spiraling out of control at lightning speed.
Well, that's right. Well, okay. Let's turn this into a square instead of a pyramid. Okay? On top of all this, what else have we got going on? Ah, yes, trade wars have begun.
Which I touched on.
I mean, Brian, this is all happening in real time as we're speaking right now. I mean, everybody has in their mind that it's just a chessboard and there's just two players. No, you and I just proved beyond any shadow of a doubt we're dealing with at least a board with 4 players, 4 situations. And everyone at this table playing this board game has one thing in mind. To win the game, it's quite simply mathematics. It always has been. It was to Napoleon. It was to George Washington. It was to Alexander the Great. This game's only played one way, and the numbers that we're talking about has always been the lives of men. And that's a fact. Now, what I just detailed, everybody needs to come to grips with. I mean, look for signs of this on the stock market. Oh my goodness, we're doing a roller coaster ride. Of course we are, because the whole world just figured out that they can circumvent American sanctions. Everything's in place. The rest of the world is going to find out very quickly they no longer have to play wag the dog with the American sanction machine. It's been effectively circumvented. Brian?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I touched on that for a brief moment. I mean, because it's what's happening, folks. Okay, just in this last week, like I pointed out earlier, all of a sudden, from out of thin air, they target all the oligarchs right next to Putin. In the meantime, we've had the Skripal, chemical warfare attack on, or alleged attack, because that's a proper way to say it, against an ex-Russian spy. All right, folks? His daughter now has come out, is giving interviews. You're getting pieces here. The whole thing is sort of it makes you ask questions as all the nations for some that have got multiple bases that have been built in Afghanistan, massive military engagement, which, mind you, look where Iran is in relation to Afghanistan. We got things set on Iran's back door. Now, in the midst of all the rest of this that we have been talking about for the last, how has it been? We're going into our second year now, started the End Time Tribune. And we've been chronicling this the entire way. Folks, we knew something was fast. But when you you can see, if we see a chemical in attack in Syria, we're all leaping into the front. As I said, 40 minutes after I got up that I found out about the reports of the missiles. Then, within hours, the stories begin to circulate and are stating that Israel made the strike on an airbase near Homs. Well, and then lo and behold, we have it encoded. And this is telling us this is hugely important. And this.
Hey, Brian, you're cutting out bad right now. I hope you didn't drop, because that would mean I'm solo on air. Well, let's hope I'm on air. I think we've got 60 seconds left. The host just called the 60-second mark. So let me say this. Ladies and gentlemen, in all of this mix, don't forget all the consternation going on with Saudi Arabia right now in the court system, with everything tied with 9/11. Ladies and gentlemen, this is ratcheting up, and it's crossing the threshold where no one will be able to maintain it. If this all breaks out at once, it's going to be mass chaos. So, with that in mind, I guess we're down to 3 seconds now. So, you've been listening to the Overt Attention Show with Brian Ingram. You can find him on Twitter. Just look for Overt Attention Show, and I do believe he's got overtattentionshow.com still up. I haven't been over there for a while, but until next time, ladies and gentlemen, God bless, Godspeed.